First of all, I want to thank everybody for participating in the webinar. I hope you got a lot out of it. We've had some very good feedback from it. One is that people would like to see things that were a little bit more up to date, specifically from some of the areas where our product is shown. Just so you know, we are actually working on that. Should have that soon. Information-wise, I don't think it's going to change too much. There are going to be some additional pieces put in there, but you are going to see things kind of moved into 2015. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jason Spangler. I'm the flooring division manager here at Wagner, responsible for the Rapid RH and for our line of wood meters for testing wood subfloors and finished wood products. I want to say that I'm going to get to your questions in just a second. So if you do have any questions that you have, please email them to me. But if for some reason you don't get to them, or if for some reason I don't get to them, or if you think of something after the fact, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. Again, my name is Jason Spangler. It's 800-634-9961, and it's extension 235. So again, if you need anything now or in the future, don't hesitate to give us a call. So the first question that I have out there revolves around, comes from David, and it says, what's the best method to protect probes while they're in place? Does covering them mess up the readings? So David, with any of the Rapid RH sensors that you buy, you will get a plastic cap that comes with it. And so you're going to put the sensor into the concrete. There's a cap that goes over the top of it that fits inside of the sleeve, if you will, and sits down flush on the concrete. I say flush. It's about the thickness of a quarter. That really is, to follow the ASTM standard per the letter of the law, you do need to have that cap in place. What I will say is that most people that I talk to, because I personally have had instances where you may potentially have a laborer on site that is doing a good job of what they're supposed to be doing, which is making sure that things are clean. And I've had people where I've done 10 or 15 tests in an area, walked away for 10 minutes, come back, and all the caps are gone off the concrete because the laborer had gone through and cleaned all the caps off because they didn't know what it was. What I typically will recommend is that you get some type of tape. Gorilla Tape works really good. Comes in usually a 3-inch. Bright colors, red, orange, things like that, and just put an X over the top of that cap. So you put the cap on, put the X over the top of it. Does a couple things. One is it kind of brings up the, caution, maybe don't pull this thing up. The other thing is you're able to take it and take a Sharpie and put whatever the test number is on top of that so that you can coincide that with your documentation that you have. Makes the whole process a little bit easier. So just to give you an idea, cap comes with every sensor that you buy. Yes, you should be utilizing them. Biggest reason, especially for the Rapid RH side, one, you need them to be within the ASTM parameters, but the other side of it is you want to make sure that you keep any kind of construction debris out of the inside of that sensor so that when you come back to read it, you can actually get to it. Another question I get a lot is slab thickness. So if we have a slab on grade, how do I really know how thick the slab is? Because obviously, as Howard presented here, that 40% depth in the slab that you drill to is fairly critical. Obviously, new construction, you're going off construction documents. At the end of the day, you're trying to do the best you can, do your due diligence to try to find that thickness. I realize that when concrete is placed, yes, it's specified to be 5 inches or 4 inches or whatever, but there can be some fairly decent variances. Unfortunately, you don't have too much control over that, so it's one of those things where you try to do the best you can with the information that you have. There are a lot of times on renovations where there's going to be trenching to move plumbing for different placement of bathrooms, things of that nature. If you can get in there to be able to see that. Sometimes depending on the type of construction, when you look at that, you can look at it from the perimeter. So there's what I tell people is, especially people that aren't used to having to look for slab thickness or aren't used to this type of testing, is that once you actually start having it in your head that that's something you need to figure out, surprising how many different ways it comes about. Worst case scenario, I have people out there that will take smaller diameter drill bits. They'll pick a couple of spots on the slab. I'm not saying, or I'm not, saying to make sure that I'm not saying to turn the slab into Swiss cheese, but you can actually drill a couple of pilot holes all the way through the slab, take some pliable wire, make a J-hook out of it so it's a little bit wider at the top, so that when you push it down to the hole, it compresses that J-hook. Push it all the way down the slab until you feel it pop out on the bottom. Pull it up until you feel a little resistance. Mark the Sharpie on the top of the surface of the concrete. As you pull that out, you'll see where the resemblance of the bottom of that J was at, and compare that to your Sharpie line. Gives you an idea of what your thickness is. You can do that in a couple spots just to make sure there aren't any huge variances, and then go forward from there. That's what I see people doing. So that kind of helps you slab on grade. The other question that I get a lot of times about pan decking, placement of pan decking if you're looking at an elevated slab where the concrete's poured in pan decking. I have to say right now, the ASTM standard is totally silent on specifics for placement in pan decking. In other words, do you just take the shallow part and go 40% of that? Do you take the thick part, go 40% of that and place it anywhere? But there are two common ways that are being done in the field. One is going 40% of the thickest part of the slab and making sure that sensor is actually put in that thickest part. Next question that people always ask is, well, how do I determine that? You can get a very inexpensive metal detector from like Home Depot, Lowe's, something like that. Most of them look like much like a stud finder for finding the wood studs in walls. They're usually strong enough to pick up the high points in the pan decking, but they're not so strong that they'll pick up the low points. So you can put them on the surface of the concrete and move them across, and it'll pick up the high spot, move it over a little bit, it'll pick up the high spot. If you mark those two and then drill in the middle, that's going to be your deepest section. Go 40% of whatever that thickness is. Another way that people are looking at it in the ASTM committee is actually looking at trying to prove this a little bit more, but there are actually people out there utilizing this process, is coming up with an effective thickness. And an effective thickness based on the shallow compared to the deep, and then actually putting them together and getting 40% of that and drilling anywhere on the slab. I'm not being real specific on that because, again, there's some varying ideas on that, but that just gives you an idea of how some people are doing it in the field. Our recommendation at this point is to identify the deepest section and drill 40% of that. Have another question from David. What if the probe gets wet during testing? That one I can't 100% guarantee. It could, if it's so wet, it could be one of those things where it doesn't read. What I can tell you is that physical water on a slab, or physical water in the sensor or on the sensor, typically will make the sensor read what I would call a stupid low number, 17, 18% relative humidity. Because what you end up with is you end up with physical water. With the technology, it actually shorts the sensor out to a point. It'll still give you a reading, but it reads very, very, very low. I've done some stuff where I've put water in there, let it dry out, and it seemed to work correctly. But there's nothing that I can sit there and guarantee that if you get rain in there that it's going to work and be 100% absolutely perfect. It's one of the reasons why when you look at, besides the other points of how concrete dries and things like that, it's one of the reasons why when you look at it from a F2170 standpoint, we look at it and say that it should be in a environment that's at service conditions, typically without rain getting on it. Now, I do have some applications now where the sensors are being used in roofing for the roof decks, But with the roof decks, it ends up being something where they will typically take an additional step to protect that sensor to ensure that it doesn't have any kind of water that can get down inside of it. So I have a comment from James that says that would break the vapor barrier and possible cause an issue. Drilling test holes. James, you're absolutely correct. But if you look at the lesser of two evils, one, if the two holes that are put in there from you drilling holes through it on a smaller diameter, say 3/16, are the worst things that happen to that vapor retarder, in order to help you get a more accurate reading or an accurate gauge of what the thickness of that concrete is, then I would say it's probably a reasonably good win. Again, a lot of things that we do in the construction world sometimes, are the lesser of two evils. And just assuming that something's 4 inches and going at 40% of that, and it's really 6 inches, you're not doing anybody any service in that situation. Again, I'm not being a proponent of something. I'm just letting you know what's actually being done out in the field. Looks like I have another question that came through. James Camp, another one. How effective are these for mitigation purposes? Unfortunately, James, I have to say I'm not 100% clear on what your question is here. I'm going to make an assumption that you're asking how effective are these in gauging what type of mitigation system to use as far as what levels of moisture are in the concrete. From that standpoint, they're very effective. Obviously, people use them all the time to gauge whether or not they need to use a good, better, best system of mitigation. Obviously, James, if that is not the answer to the question, or if I'm not understanding your question correctly, please don't hesitate to just give me a call directly. I'll be more than happy to have a discussion with you about that. Looks like at this point, those are all the questions that I have. Again, my name's Jason Spangler. My direct phone number is 800-634-9961, and my extension is 235. Thanks, and have a great day.